The participants in the plan started off when we developed the initial RFP. We looked for an experienced firm that could work with us, and we identified a company out of Ohio called Tiburon Technologies. They had experience. They actually performed the initial pilot study with us, so we were satisfied that they could do the work. And so they brought in their team and worked with my team of 5 and our database organization, which is four people, and Tiburon's organization, probably 4 to 10 people with a project manager, depending on the demands of the work at the time. When we enlisted them, the overall plan was to address converting the database, eventually to work on the online environment, and then eventually the batch environment. So step 1 was to isolate the data schemas out of the old environment, recreate them in the new SQL Server environment, develop technologies to migrate the data from one environment to the other, develop some technologies to cleanse the data, so if there was any bad data that was sitting in the old environment, get that out. So Tiburon worked on that phase of the operation. We shipped them a lot of data in the process, and then eventually delivered us a finished database that could support all the old data in the new technology. The next phase of the project was to divide the online environment into multiple segments. The highly structured nature of the solution lent itself easily to that, so we took different aspects of the online systems, and Tiburon Technology, using automated code conversion technologies, created the new solution out of the old ideal environment in the new COBOL environment. They would create the solution, ship us segments of the environment, and we would proceed to test it. After we'd gotten through all the online environments and gotten those all unit tested and kind of working, we went into the batch side of the application. Tiburon took the old JCL and the old COBOL batch programs, converted those, and those pieces were delivered to us, and we continued the testing of the solution at that point. There was a commitment from the vendor to help us with some training. However, most of the actual training was on the job. The interesting part and the successful part of the operation is because we were brought into the new technologies as testers and eventually support in testing, and additionally using the technology to fix the technology. My team developed the skills to use the new tools by the time we had the product ready for implementation. So because of the partnership between Tiburon and us, my team was well ready by the time we implemented in August of 2008 to support the product full time. The key success factor in this whole project was the fact that we spent 16 months testing this system. There are very few technologies, new technologies, that are integrated into the workplace that get that amount of testing. And that's a big benefit to the lift and shift opportunity, because we weren't trying to develop new technologies. So we spent the whole 15 months testing this. The vendor did initial testing, unit testing, to make sure the systems work. My team picked it up for additional testing at that point. And then after we got through our testing, we engaged our users, so they did acceptance testing. We did additional testing where the TAPIS property tax system is basically an annual billing system. And so we took images of the annual cycle, saved those off, and used them as test beds for additional testing. So we could basically capture key activities that occurred throughout the year. We did extensive testing of those sections, and thereby assured us that we were able to get those pieces of the work done in advance. And then finally, at the very end, we did a pseudo-parallel type test with our users, where we developed typical scenarios that would tie the 3 departments, the auditor, the assessor, and the tax collector, together with scenarios we built. We ran them all and ensured that the results were identical in our mainframe testing environment and our new SQL Server Windows testing environment. So that was the last piece before we implemented, and during that time we implemented all the infrastructure technologies that needed to be in place to manage this in a professional manner in a data center. There were two areas of implementation challenges, one from our own side, the Marin County side, and I'm sure the Tiburon organization had their set. From a Tiburon Technologies, they were improving their own systems to automate the conversions of these old systems, and they ended up with an excellent solution, but that was involved taking JCL and converting it to VB scripts. So a lot of those things were challenging given how complicated that kind of environment is. On our side of the organization, we underestimated the amount of effort it would take to replace the legacy IBM infrastructure. That structure would support printing, would support job control, would support report distribution. All of that was outside the scope of just converting the TAPIS application. So we had to create that whole environment with the help of the vendor and get that established in the Windows environment. The other issue that was a challenge was getting the timing correct. We had 3 departments with different peaks of demand, and we had to find a point in time for the annual billing cycle, assessment and billing cycle, where everyone would be happy to have the system unavailable for a day or 2 or 3 while we ramp up the conversion. And the other big challenge was that there was no way we were going to be able to do this if we didn't do it perfectly. This is a $700 million revenue system, and we couldn't drop the ball on that from a County of Marin perspective. The project took approximately 2 years, a little under 2 years, and my team was engaged for all of that time. We had the database team engaged in pretty much most of that time, and the Tiburon technology involved for that. The Tiburon contract was $1.25 million. My team was involved for about 2 years. And then we had about $250,000 of infrastructure costs to build to put it together. The surprising thing to most people after we go through this whole thing is the new system looks identical to the old system. And if it weren't for the fact that there's a little change in the border around the window, and we told them that they have a new system, they wouldn't have known there was a difference. Even though the system looks the same, the architecture is very different or actually it's kind of similar to the old architecture in the mainframe. The physical design, there's a very small footprint on the user's workstation. Most of the application software resides on a server, and then we have a database server. So that's the physical design. From a logical design, it's what we'd kind of call a server-side, client-side application, where most of the online work actually executes on the user's workstation. The programs are dynamically loaded to the workstation as needed during the work, and then all the batch activities will run on the server side. So it's a fairly simple architecture and is somewhat reminiscent of the mainframe, where you had kind of a dumb terminal operating.